So with the excruciating violence of the Emperor's children soon to be unleashed on an unsuspecting galaxy, let's talk through all the rules, teasers and previews that we have of them for an overview of how the army is likely to play in 10th edition. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Emperor's Children once more. It's been just over 24 hours since Games Workshop showed off the full range for the faction in that big Las Vegas Open preview, which gave us really quite a good idea as to how the army is going to work, the units within it, and all the cool new models. In the preview session, they actually gave us a surprising amount of rules, hints and teasers. In some of the previous ones, they've just shown off the pretty pictures of the models without talking about any of the rules that they'll get, but I feel like it definitely adds a dimension to know how the models and codex are actually going to be functioning on the tabletop. Given that we've got so much information that came with a whole variety of different things, all the stuff that they talked about in the stream, a few more teasers in the articles, a couple of hints from some datasheet pictures with some blurry images alongside the codex, and also just what we can see the different miniatures are armed with in-game, there's actually quite a lot that we can tell about the units and can guess a fair bit more. In this video, rather than talking as much about the models, I thought it could be good to really focus on the rules and just summarise all the stuff that they told us about the new book, plus a few other things that we could reasonably work out just because of how Games Workshop tends to do things with army rules these days. Let's talk through the core stuff first with the core rules and general theme of the faction, and then go through the unique datasheets and everything that we were told about them. Jumping straight in, and first up we have the core rule for the faction. We were told that this one was called Thrill Seekers, and compared with how the Emperor's Children are now, that would be instead of the Chaos Space Marine Dark Pacts. So things like the Noise Marines would lose the ability to just gain sustained or lethal hits whenever they shoot or fight, and that won't be a thing that the entire army can access. It could mean that they might hit a little bit less hard than the average Chaos Space Marines, though I guess points, costs and profiles will probably represent that. Apparently this core rule will allow them to advance or fall back but still charge, and advance and charge is really quite a big deal in Warhammer 40k, an extra d6 inch threat range to anything on the tabletop, and given that it seems to be melee focused, it's definitely going to push the army into trying to get into close combat as opposed to fighting at range. I'd say the fallback and charge isn't quite as powerful as the advance and charge, though still definitely useful. Means that Emperor's Children units won't just be locked up in close combat. You can't just say throw a transport vehicle into a squad that can't deal with it and then know that they can't charge something different. It actually maybe keeps the opponent honest and maybe means that you'll actually have to deal with each of the units in turn. Very non-specifically, they said that it comes with a few restrictions. No idea what that could be, whether it just applies to, say, infantry and monsters, but not vehicles perhaps, or whether it could be one of those ones where you get to nominate a certain amount of units to be able to activate with that each battle round. But either way, I feel like just to be meaningful, there will be a way to get it on your most important stuff that you really need to make those long charges or mix it up with different melees. The other core theme that they seem to have is going faster than average. It seems that the standard legionary equivalents in both the Tormentors and the Infractors both get a 7-inch move rather than the 6 inches that Chaos Space Marines get. I think they confirmed one in the stream and the other one seems to have it printed on that blurry datasheet. So it feels like that might be the sort of base speed of the standard Marines. I really wouldn't be surprised if the Flawless Blades could be even faster with their demonic gifts, though it seems that the Noise Marines are slightly slower. They move 6 inches, which I think is because they're sort of a Havoc equivalent now, and the Havocs in Codex Chaos Space Marines move 5 inches. They're probably going to have this sort of slow and purposeful thing going on, but even the Noise Marines move faster than the average Havocs, it seems. Overall, knowing Slaanesh themes in Warhammer 40k, they'll likely be fast moving, good in close combat, but probably not all that tough at the points to balance them out. So compared with other Space Marines, might be a slight army of glass cannons maybe, and probably with a fair few profiles that tend to be better at killing light to heavy infantry as opposed to tough monsters and vehicles. At least if we're going by the sort of stat lines that the Chaos Demon Slaanesh units have. I feel like most of the units don't really seem to be particularly attuned to taking down big tanks and vehicles for the ones they showed off, more sort of duelist themes with sabres and blades, but I'm sure some of the elites will just be very general purpose dangerous all around. It feels like Noise Marines are maybe going to run counter to that theme a little bit, with slow moving and relentless ranged firepower. They just feel like they're going to play very differently to just about everything else. For datasheets in the Codex, it looks like they're going to have 8 unique units when they launch, the Primarch Fulgrim himself, then 3 characters in Lucius the Eternal, the Lord Exultant and the Lord Kakophonist, and then 4 unique squads in the Noise Marines, Tormentors, Infractors and Flawless Blades. We've heard a fair bit about each of them and I'll go through them one by one in a second. For other things that the army is going to be able to access though, we had confirmed on 8 other different datasheets from Core Codex Chaos Marines. They've got the Demon Prince and no doubt the Winged variant, or the Deity Traitor Legions get those. They mentioned Terminators and Spawn for other squad type units, and we can see some Terminators getting out of a Land Raider here. And then for vehicles and demon engines, we've got the Maw the Fiend, Helldrake, Rhino and Land Raider confirmed. I guess the Morphine could be another option for something to take down heavy hitters, I guess. At the moment we don't 100% know whether or not that's the full list. Maybe the single most obvious one feels like the Hellbrutes that they didn't mention. I'd be really surprised if the Emperor's Children didn't get access to them. Another kind of likely ones could be things like Forge Fiends and Predators as well. Would feel odd if they got the Mauler Fiend but not the Forge Fiend. And all the Deity Legions have had access to Predators. Cultists definitely feel like a possibility as well, given that the Death Guard and the Thousand Sons get them. But the World Eaters didn't, though they have their Jackal equivalents, I suppose. None of those units were present in the big army-wide picture that they did for them, though, so I'd still put them all down as unconfirmed at the moment. Finally, for the third section of the Codex, we've got the Slaanesh Demons, presuming that none of the datasheets are dropped. That would be the Keeper of Secrets, Shalaxi Hellbane, the Infernal Enrapturist, the Mask, the Transweaver, and Celeste, Demonettes, Fiends, and Seekers of units of stuff to run up the board, and then 4 different flavours of Seeker Chariots, though I feel like some of which maybe could get consolidated, and the Soul Grinder of Slaanesh, presuming that that sticks around. I think that currently the Transweaver is without a current plastic model, so there's a chance that the Standard Herald might get removed, which if so would be one less datasheet there. For ones that seem heavily odds on, it does mean that we've got around about roughly 30 datasheets in the Codex, and potentially a few more if they had a few more of that list of Codex Chaos Space Marines. I feel like it's maybe not the worst idea to give Emperor's Children's player a heads up as to what they could get to start the army if they wanted to. If you're absolutely itching to start the force and get going already, I guess you could pick up a Rhino or 2 to transport things from A to B, or some Slaanesh Demons to run alongside them. Having the demons in the army book probably means that it's going to be optimal to take at least some of them in most armies, unless they manage to make the rules ridiculously underwhelming for them and only good in a dedicated detachment. For say optimised tournament Emperor's Children list though, it seems like there'd be a good odds that you'd be running along with some demons and some Space Marines. Finally, for core rule sections, the other one that we really don't know that much about are the 6 detachments in the Codex. I must admit that number was a bit of a surprise. I guess it's all very holy for the Prince of Pleasure, but also 6 detachments does seem kind of excessive even with the demons in. I feel like the Emperor's Children, like the rest of the Deity Traitor Legions and the Divergent chapters for the Space Marines, kind of feel like very cool but slightly jumped up sub-factions in their own way. It's just surprising that they have quite that many ways to play when, say, an army like Guard only got 5 in the Codex, plus a Grotmus one. I feel like it would probably cover some obvious themes. I'm sure there'll be a general purpose, balanced Emperor's Children style detachment. Almost certainly a working in tandem allied demons and Emperor's Children, similar to the Talons of the Emperor for the Custodes, or that Tau auxiliary cadre that they got for Grotmus. It seems very likely that there'll be a dedicated demon detachment, maybe kind of similar to the Grotmus Excess one. And then I guess beyond that it'd be getting a bit more creative. I wouldn't be too surprised to see maybe an Elites and Fulgrim focused one, supporting those flawless blades and maybe Terminators. For the other maybe obvious theme of the army, there could be a sonic weapon focus one to make Noise Marines the absolute centerpiece. And then for a 6th one, I'm really not too sure after that. Maybe a character focused one. There's certainly a fair few armies that have had one version or another, or perhaps something playing into their drugged up combat stims or something. In any case, there's going to be a perhaps surprising amount of different ways to play Emperor's Children, and seemingly some ways to mix in Slaanesh Demons as well. In any case, it will be pretty interesting whenever Games Workshop decide to give us some proper teasers of these ones. These perhaps remain the biggest question mark. Before we move on to the individual units, I'll just give a quick shout out to the video sponsor in Weyland-Yutani terrain. They asked to sponsor some videos to showcase their competitive style Warhammer 40k terrain. The main focus on these ones being really quite a functional battlefield. They supply a lot of tournaments including the WTC. Their style terrain bits are made of lightweight but fairly sturdy plastic, and they have a fair few choices as to what sort of styles you want them in. They've got some ruins, an Arctic laboratory or medieval castle themed ones here, though there's a few others. And an entire tournament table set, such as this WTC Warmaster GT pack, costs around £120, $150 or €140. This one gets you 4 of the big ruins, 6 medium ones, and a bunch of crates. They've got a few other options though, including the current Pariah Nexus terrain pack, slightly bigger focus on the great big ruins this one, plus some sort of girder forest type things. And they have some smaller ones as well. If you just want some line of sight blocking terrain to hide some knights and big stuff on the tabletop, these could be an alright supplement to another terrain set. In any case, thanks to them for sponsoring this one. Feel free to check them out, links down in the video description. And there's the discount code Auspex5 for 5% off to save a little bit on an order. Back to the Emperor's Children though, and let's talk through their datasheets. First up, we've got Lucius the Eternal, who we do already have the current datasheet for. In his current incarnation, he has a Torrent Doom Siren, a whole bunch of attacks with a big 8 of them at Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 2, and Fights First. He's good at killing enemy leaders with precision. and has his fun and fluffy Armor of Shrieking Souls ability, where if he's slain, then the unit that killed him has to take a leadership test, with a chance to deal some mortal wounds, and potentially even resurrect Lucius onto the board if it destroys the unit outright. The Shrieking Souls bit maybe doesn't come up all that often, but kind of hilarious if it ever does. In the teasers, they stated that he was going to have the option of being a lone operative, but would still have the option to lead units as well. They stated in the stream that when he fights alone, he's just better in some way, so if that's accurate, I guess that will be one of his special rules, maybe upping his attacks or giving him some sort of better damage output if he's not fighting alongside anyone else. He is one of the datasheets that you can see in the teaser for the launch box, though unfortunately it's just ridiculously blurry and hard to read. A few things that you can make out though is that he no longer has a ranged attack, so he's lost his Doom Siren, I guess. But it does seem that he has two different melee profiles rather than one, I guess probably one representing the Layer Blade and one the Lash of Torment, either via a sweep and strike type profile or some extra attacks. It does perhaps look like his toughness might be a toughness 5 by that, though it's kind of hard to make out, and also looks like he could be movement 8 as well, which if so could be a bit indicative for the Flawless Blades. On the leader section, under the profile, it looks like he can only lead the one unit. It looks like it's the Flawless Blades that he can join, so it doesn't look like he could run alongside Noise Marines or either of the troops choices. That goes quite well with how he was set up in the army shot picture, his picture leading 6 Flawless Blades into battle, so I guess they can all go Alpha Duelist against the enemy together if you'd like to. It'll be interesting to see how well he does as a lone operative if he does wind up going down that route. I feel like a fairly fast and fairly fighty one could certainly be a lot of interest to people, particularly with fights first. Though if he does keep that, then granting it off to the unit of Flawless Blades could also be a really big thing, particularly if they're heroic intervening or something. Otherwise, for the datasheets that we have seen before, there's the Noise Marines. In their current incarnation, they're more like legionary equivalents with some special weapons, 85 points per 5 or 170 per 10. Sonic Blasters spamming out the Strength 5 attacks, and the Blastmaster having two different profiles with a Strength 9 and Damage 3-1, or a Strength 6 AP1 and Damage 1-1. They do seem to have been efficient enough that people have done well at tournaments with them. The new Noise Marines do seem to be keeping some of the things the same, but also changing a bunch. It looks like these guys are going to be run in units of 6. It seems that there's 6 in the box set, and as a result I suspect that's going to be the only squad size that's allowed. I can't really see Games Workshop allowing people to take a full 12 of these guys. They look like they're on fairly big chunky 40mm bases, and they're fairly intimidating profiles. In the stream they describe them as bigger and tougher than other Marines, think Havoc equivalents. Havocs in Codex Chaos Space Marines are toughness 5 and 2 wounds, and it looks like their Blurry edge sheet still seems to be 2 wounds. It's hard to make out the toughness stats, though I would suspect it's probably going to be T5 for them, though it doesn't necessarily actually mean that they're going to be durable as a unit. Hopefully their shooting is going to be very dangerous, and I still suspect that they might not be the hardest unit to shoot down for their points cost. From that same datasheet it looks like they still move 6 inches, which would be 1 inch slower than the base troops. Again, that would put them in line with Havocs moving 1 inch slower. And for their war gear, the majority of the squad takes Sonic Blasters, though it looks like 2 out of the unit can take a Blastmaster. There's a squad equipped that way in the big overall army shot, and those Blastmasters still have 2 different damage profiles, one for taking down heavy tanks and vehicles, and one to help chew through infantry. The unit leader is called a Disharmonist, and he seems to have a Power Sword and Screamer Pistol in all the pictured units. He might be locked into that war gear. I'm not sure whether or not he'll have the option to swap out for a Sonic Blaster if it makes sense to. Hopefully he's interesting enough to be worth it, and it isn't just going to be the first model that you take casualties on to preserve the heavy and special weapons. Finally, I am kind of interested to see what those shoulder-mounted things wind up being. There's some great big amplifier speaker grills that might feed into their special rule. It doesn't look like they've got their own range damage profile in their own right though. It looks like it's just the Blastmaster, Sonic Blaster and the Screamer Pistol listed there. In any case, hopefully they make them nicely dangerous enough. I feel like if they keep the Blastmasters pretty similar to the previous profile, they'll definitely still be a weapon to fear. Next up, for their standard Lord choice, they've got the Lord Exultant. This one really does feel like an analogue of the standard Chaos Space Marine Lord, and has the choice of a whole bunch of different war gear, a Phoenix Spear, Power Fist, Mastercrafted Power Sword and Rupture Lash, and then for ranged weapons it's a Plasma Pistol and Screamer Pistol. For the vast majority of melee weapons in Warhammer 40k, it's tended to be the Power Fist that's the punchy one so far in 10th edition. Mastercrafted Power Swords usually get more attacks, but compromising on the strength doesn't tend to be worth it. It'll be fun to find out what that Rupture Lash and the Phoenix Spear do. Both of those I suppose will be new profiles. The Phoenix Spear, I wouldn't be too surprised if it gets the Lance keyword. It's probably going to pay for that in other stats, and the Lash I'm not sure, maybe it could give some extra attacks or something. His special rule is apparently going to be Euphoric Strikes, once per game getting a melee damage buff to himself. That seems very equivalent with the standard Chaos Lord and his big once per game damage boost, or the standard Space Marine Captain even. And given that he's the core Lord character, I'd guess he's probably going to get the -1 command point per stratagem rule when he's leading a unit. In any case, hopefully he'll be good enough to build around. The standard Chaos Space Marine Lord is definitely worth it. If he goes with the same stat line, he'll be toughness 4 with 5 wounds and a 4+ invulnerable save. I'd guess he'll be moving 7 inches in this army. I'm honestly not too sure which of the different units he'll be allowed to attach to. I'd hope maybe all of them, but he might be locked out of them because of reasons, given that say Chaos Lords can't attach to Havocs for example. The one who we know is able to attach to the Noise Marines though is the Lord Kakophonist. He's billed as the Sonic Weaponry Commander of the Noise Marines, basically armed with an enormous great big Doom Siren amplifier on his back. That's currently the one that gives you a sort of torrent attacks with Strength 6, AP 1, Damage 1. So I feel like just given the sheer size and imposingness of that thing, I'd not be at all surprised to see it hit far harder than that. For his other weapons, he either gets a pair of Screamer pistols as modelled here, or can take a power sword. I feel like surely with the pistol loadout, he's probably going to have the pistol keyword on the Doom Siren as well, hopefully meaning that he can fire everything in combat if he's engaged. His special rule is Obsessive Enunciation, which gives Noise Marines sustained hits 1, so it seems that he's going to be a massive damage amplifier to the unit. I guess you need to weigh up whether or not the extra boost that he gives plus his own damage profile is going to be worth his points cost, though it could be interesting for some detachments to get enhancements in the unit. I feel like they are a squad that's going to be worth buffing. Then for the base troops for the army, we've got the Tormentors and Infractors, a dual build kit of 10 models, so it feels kind of equivalent to Space Marine Intercessors or Chaos Legionaries. As a result, like them, I'd be surprised if you can't fill them in squads of either 5 or 10. In the absence of any sort of unique cultists or things like that, it looks like these are going to be the objective grabbing Space Marines, even if their lore might suggest that they get bored with that. They move 7 inches, which does seem confirmed from their datasheet. They have the infiltrate keyword so they can set up in the midboard, and they said they have OC2 as well. That's kind of an interesting combo given that OC2 isn't usually something that comes alongside infiltrate, so a lot of weight on objectives right from the start there. And their special rule is to defile objectives, which gives it the sticky objectives sort of rule, which I guess maybe does make sense for them given that if you move off it then it still remains yours, so they don't have to sit around on guard duty if they don't want to. Otherwise I'm sure they'll have the standard legionary profile with toughness 4 and 2 wounds and a 3+ save and all that. Otherwise it really doesn't look like these guys are going to be all that good in terms of damage output. They seem like a unit that you take for your special rules. Their standard guys get regular bolt guns, which if they don't get any extra AP or something like that are still going to be equally weedy as wherever else you can take them. The leader is able to take some sort of power whip type thing and a plasma pistol, and it seems that you can get 2 special weapons per squad of 10 of them. The ones in a few of the pictures model both a plasma gun and a melter gun. If they're going by the legionary sort of pattern, I guess it might be 1 per 5 of those. Overall, just from that stuff alone, if they're well balanced with points, they seem like they're almost certainly going to be worth having. Maybe a unit or 2 of them to hold the midboard, or perhaps put their rule on the home field objective. Unless they're horrendously overcosted, I feel like some of them are going to be auto-include, but spamming them is going to be a bad idea due to low damage. Next up, we've got the Infractors. They're the dual build with the Tormentors, and I'm not 100% sure if they confirm that these guys were also battle line troops, but it seems heavily odds on. They also get good movement rules though with the Scouts keyword. They also move 7 inches and get precision attacks with their dueling sabres, which I certainly hope will get AP 1 the same way as the Astartes chainswords do. If they don't and they just treat them like sort of old style Reaver combat knives, then that will be very bad news for them. In the various different pictures for them, it doesn't look like they're taking any sort of fancy gear or special weapons as best I can tell. In one of the pictures it looks like the leader might be equipped with a power sword potentially, as it looks like he's got a glowing bit on the side of it, though it could just easily be a fancy looking one of these dueling sabres. In any case though, those blades seem to be pretty odds on to be damage 1 weapons, so it feels like they're going to be good at skirmishing with enemy chaff. I can't really imagine them being super reliable at taking down characters unless they've got some sort of fancy special rule like devastating wounds or similar. Low AP weapons with probably strength 4 aren't really going to have all that much impact on tougher stuff like Terminator characters. Definitely still could be an interesting option for interference board chaff though. With what we know about them so far though, I feel like their special rule might be one of the more make or break things. Next up, we've got the Emperor's Children elites in the Flawless Blades. These guys are the elite duelists of the Legion with a bunch of demonic gifts, but not outright possessed. Slanesh seems to have given them a whole bunch of different mutations and stuff, including making their breastplate live up to its name. And these guys are going to be sold in box sets of 3, which makes it incredibly likely that you'll be able to field units of 3 or 6 of these guys, similar to things like Blade Guard or Aggressors or Sanguinary Guard or Inner Circle Companions. That's the way that Games Workshop seems to go with those units in 10th edition. Similar to basically all of those guys, I think that it's very likely that these get a 3 wound profile. Veteran elites that are a little bit harder to take down than you might guess. And again, I would guess that they'll get some boosted movement, probably at least 7 inches, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they get more. If they're matching Lucius the Eternal, it could be 8. For their melee weapons, they're armed with bliss blades. It looks like a few of them have some slightly different appearances, like taking 2 dueling saber type things rather than 1. Though I still wouldn't be too surprised if they're just all at 1 consolidated profile. I'd be betting something like strength 5 to 6, damage 2 power swords with various special rules, and their datasheet rule apparently gives them some sort of melee boost, but apparently risks their own demise in some way if they don't get any kills. In the stream there seems to imply that they could be outright slain. I don't know whether it might just be taking a chunk of mortal wounds though if they disappoint Slaanesh. Obviously we don't really know too much about them just yet, but it seems like they have at least pretty good odds at being one of the best damage dealers, and to fit in quite well with similar sort of profiles for say Inner Circle Companions and Sanguinary Guard, which are both pretty dangerous in game right now. If they can get lethal hits or reroll wound rolls from any buff, stratagems or attached characters, then they'll certainly enjoy that. Finally, last but not least, we have Fulgrim himself, which given that we know the rules really quite well for the other Demon Primarchs, basically means that we can assume a fair bunch of things about him unless there's any surprises. The other Primarchs are Toughness 11, 16 wounds, a 2+ save with a 4+ invulnerable, and can all deep strike. I guess it's not impossible they could make the Slaanesh one just a little bit less tough in some way, like a T10 or similar. It wouldn't exactly be the end of the world if so though. Given Slaanesh things though, it seems like that he's going to be either the fastest or the joint fastest. Magnus moves 14 inches with fly, he could move 14 or even 16. When they read out his weapons, they said he's got a Malefic Lash, Demonic Blades, and a Serpentine Tail, though it doesn't really tell us too much. That could all be in one consolidated profile like with Angron. I wouldn't be too surprised to see him get a Sweep and Strike style profile though. Again, with Slaanesh and having 4 arms on the go, I'd guess that he's probably going to have a big flurry of attacks, rather than just a few really massive damage hits. For his datasheet abilities, they said something about Demonic Poisons, which again isn't really all that much to go on. I guess it's possible it could be an anti-big stuff sort of special rule, maybe representing his talent for killing Primarchs. And then he's got the choice of 3 different demonic powers, and like the other demon Primarchs, a good chance he'll be choosing those at the start of the command phase or battle round, apparently one of which is his Fights First. Could just be him or could be an aura. Having Fights First on such a big threatening model is going to be a big handful though. Lionel Johnson can already be incredibly problematic to deal with for certain armies, particularly ones that get their killing done in melee. Having this on a demon Primarch that's even harder to kill at range is probably going to be bad news for some. In comments and things, I've also seen a lot of people making a big deal of the fact that they said that he had a 1v1 Fulgrim versus Angron fight, and Demon Primarch Fulgrim won all 3. I feel like there's just so many possibilities that could make that the case that it's almost not really worth focusing on too much. It's definitely possible they could have just claimed that to hype up the new model. I feel like it's unlikely we would have heard about that if Angron had just been wiping the floor with him all the time. He could have just rolled well and got lucky. It could be that he's just unusually good against big stuff with that Demon Poisons type special rule if it even exists. It could be just due to the fact that he has Fights First, so gets to get his attacks in first, so that would give him a big chance of getting the kill in before the latter. He could just be more powerful and cost more points to represent that, or it could be that he's overpowered and will go up in points. Just so many different possibilities that it's probably not really something to focus on, other than the fact that he'll hit very hard in melee and can be capable of taking out big stuff, though I feel like we kind of knew that already. In any case though, I'm sure he's going to be slithering his way onto a good number of battlefields in the future. Overall, really quite a lot of Emperor's Children hints, and a good amount of stuff that seems fairly likely given Games Workshop's patterns with Codex releases. Let me know your thoughts on all the hints, teasers and reveals that we've got so far down in the comments below. And of course feel free to point out anything else I might have missed. They did give us a fair bit of information from all kinds of different sources. In any case, will certainly be interesting to find out when we get a little bit more news. I guess we might not find out that many more rules things until the launch box actually goes on sale, but hopefully that's not too much longer away. In any case, I'll leave this one there for now. Feel free to check out the Weyland-Yutani terrain if you wanted a battlefield worth of competitive focus stuff. As mentioned, there's the Auspex 5 code for a 5% discount if you did think it could be of use to you. Otherwise though, I'll leave that one there for now. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. There's a few benefits for that, including seeing certain videos early, votes to see what sort of things come next, and entry into the regular prize giveaways. Feel free to check that out, linked in the video description if you'd like to support and keep the videos coming. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.